Hello everyone and welcome to my webinar. My name is Drew Terry, and as I'm sure you've seen from my poster, my webinar today is going to focus on the role of Indigenous storytelling in language and literacy education. So before we begin here, I just would like to go over the learning goals for today's webinar. We will be learning how Indigenous storytelling supports language development and literacy education. We are learning how educators can incorporate Indigenous oral traditions into their teaching practices in a respectful and meaningful way. And we are learning how storytelling fosters student engagement and a deeper connection to Indigenous perspectives in the classroom. You will be successful with these learning goals if you can explain how Indigenous storytelling supports language development and literacy education, if you can identify ways to incorporate Indigenous oral traditions into your teaching practices in a respectful and meaningful way, and if you can describe how storytelling enhances student engagement and fosters a deeper connection to Indigenous perspectives within the classroom. Before diving into the heart of the information, I just wanted to quickly go over why I chose this as my topic. So the reason I chose this topic was because of my experiences during my second placement at Lakehead in a grade 3 classroom at Majikaning Kandasawin Elementary School, which is an Indigenous school located on Rama First Nation Reserve. On this placement, I learned a lot about Indigenous studies and the importance of storytelling within education. I got to see firsthand how storytelling was used to teach lessons, to share history, and to strengthen community connections, which really helped deepen my understanding of its value within the classroom. Also, I've grown up in Orillia, Ontario with a close connection to Rama First Nation Reserve, and I've always been aware of the significance of Indigenous traditions and ways of knowing. So this has made this topic very important to me because I want to incorporate Indigenous perspectives into my own teaching practices in a respectful and meaningful way. And by exploring how storytelling supports literacy and cultural understanding, I hope to help create inclusive learning spaces where all students can see their identities and histories reflected in their education. So now you might be wondering, what exactly is Indigenous storytelling? So Indigenous storytelling is an important tradition that helps keep communities connected. It teaches life lessons and it passes down knowledge from one generation to the next. Indigenous people use storytelling as a way to share their history, their culture, and their beliefs through spoken stories rather than through written text. This also aligns with the Ontario Language Curriculum, Section A3, as Indigenous storytelling promotes a sense of identity and community while also providing students with opportunities to engage with First Nation, Métis, and Inuit perspectives and ways of knowing, which helps them develop a deeper understanding of diverse cultural traditions and histories. Storytelling also plays a key role in helping people learn about their ancestors, their values, and their ways of understanding the world around us. These stories can take different forms, including myths, personal experiences, sacred teachings, and because storytelling is such an important part of the Indigenous culture, it must be shared with deep respect, as some stories are considered sacred and meant only for certain people or situations. So while doing research, I learned from an Indigenous educator named Judy Isaac, and she spoke about how storytelling is more than just entertainment, but it's actually a way of teaching, a way of remembering, and a way of keeping traditions alive. And through storytelling, Indigenous communities continue to honor their past while also making sense of the present and helping shape their future. So now, how does storytelling actually support literacy development? Well, storytelling supports literacy development by building essential language skills such as listening, comprehension, and vocabulary, which are all listed within the Ontario Language Curriculum. When children engage with stories, they learn sentence structures, new words, and how language is used to convey meaning. Oral storytelling also helps develop critical thinking, as students will interpret messages, they'll make connections, and they'll be able to predict outcomes. In Indigenous education, storytelling creates a deep understanding of cultural knowledge and traditions while also strengthening oral communication skills. So while storytelling encourages a love for narratives, it also leads to a greater engagement with reading and writing, as by students hearing and retelling stories, they develop the confidence in expressing their own ideas, which helps support their overall literacy growth. Some of the key findings I found through my research as I explored the role of Indigenous storytelling in literacy education and how it actually fosters language development and cultural understanding and critical thinking is I found that storytelling is not just a way to share knowledge, but also a method of teaching life lessons, strengthening oral language skills, and preserving that Indigenous tradition. The research I did highlighted that storytelling enhances literacy by improving listening comprehension, expanding vocabulary, and helping students actually engage with narratives in meaningful ways. I also learned that it helps create this sense of identity and belonging for students, which makes learning much more relevant and personal for the students within the classroom. By incorporating storytelling into literacy education, we as educators are able to support students in developing strong literacy skills while also honoring the Indigenous ways of knowing and learning and helping feel this sense of inclusion and belonging within the classroom. So, now that we've talked about what exactly Indigenous storytelling is and how Indigenous storytelling supports literacy development, I wanted to talk about how us as teachers can incorporate Indigenous storytelling within our classrooms. So, teachers can incorporate Indigenous storytelling into language learning by using a wide range of resources, including oral traditions, legends, and contemporary Indigenous literature, as tools for enhancing reading activities, writing activities, speaking activities, and listening activities. So, introducing stories and books from Indigenous cultures allows teachers to teach essential language skills such as vocabulary, sentence structures, and comprehension while still promoting an appreciation for diverse worldviews and cultural perspectives. By encouraging students to retell stories in their own words or write reflections or create story based projects, teachers can help students to develop their literacy skills in a meaningful and engaging context. So, this approach also allows students to deepen their understanding of Indigenous ways of knowing and strengthens their ability to connect with different cultural narratives. One resource specifically I found very helpful with this was the Indigenous Storytelling Literature Circle by Ellen Bees. So, Ellen gives examples of Indigenous books that teachers can incorporate into their classrooms to engage students in reading and discussing novels that highlight Indigenous voices and experiences. The resource provides structured activities, discussion questions, and background information on Indigenous culture and history, which helps students understand the significance of these stories that they're reading. And by integrating this resource, I believe educators can introduce books by Indigenous authors, which will encourage critical thinking about themes related to identity, community, and cultural perspectives, and help create an inclusive learning environment that respects and honors the Indigenous knowledge and the storytelling traditions. Another great resource that I actually have seen put in place while on my placement at Magickening was the Mishomis book by Edward Benton. This is a great resource for incorporating Indigenous storytelling into your classroom. The book shares teachings, history, and traditions of the Ojibwe people through engaging narratives and cultural lessons. So it introduces students to key Anishinaabe concepts such as the seven grandfather teachings, the origins of the earth, and the significance of the four directions. The book is also written in an accessible way that allows students to connect with Indigenous perspectives while building their understanding of oral storytelling. So, by using the Mishomis book in the classroom, teachers can create discussion about identity, respect, and environmental stewardship, all while aligning with curriculum expectations related to Indigenous perspectives. So, overall, I think this book is an excellent tool for promoting cultural awareness, critical thinking, and an appreciation for Indigenous knowledge systems within your classroom. Another great resource I found through my research was a book called Braiding Sweetgrass for Young Adults by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I thought this was an excellent resource for bringing Indigenous perspectives into the classroom. So the book blends traditional Indigenous knowledge with Western scientific concepts, which offers students a unique and holistic understanding of the natural world. So, through the storytelling, the personal reflections, and ecological teachings, the book emphasizes the importance of reciprocity, respect for the environment, and the interconnectedness of all living things on our planet. I think it's a really engaging book. It has engaging writing styles and illustrations, which also make complex ideas accessible to young readers, which encourages them to reflect on their relationship with nature. I think incorporating this book into the classroom supports cross curricular learning in language arts, science, and social studies while still promoting Indigenous ways of knowing. It provides opportunities for discussion on environmental stewardship, sustainability, and the value of Indigenous knowledge in contemporary education, which overall, in my opinion, makes it a really valuable addition to any classroom library. Another way you could incorporate this into your classroom would be to actually invite Indigenous elders or knowledge keepers into the classroom and share oral stories and give students the opportunity to hear firsthand accounts and help demonstrate the deep respect and spiritual significance of storytelling in the Indigenous community. So, storytelling in the classroom not only aids language development, but it also empowers students to understand the importance of oral traditions as a primary means of knowledge transmission. I think by incorporating Indigenous storytelling into language learning, educators can create a classroom environment that is both inclusive and culturally responsive, which allows students to appreciate multiple forms of communication, learning, and expression that honor the richness of Indigenous traditions. So, this practice nurtures empathy, it broadens students' global perspectives, and ensures that Indigenous knowledge and culture are woven into the fabric of contemporary education. So, to shift the focus now, I just wanted to touch on some potential challenges you might face when trying to incorporate Indigenous storytelling into the classroom. As with everything, there's always challenges that arise. And when incorporating Indigenous storytelling into the classroom, it can definitely present some challenges, particularly for those educators who may not have their own deep understanding of Indigenous cultures or oral traditions. A challenge you might face is ensuring authenticity and accuracy when sharing Indigenous stories, as some traditional narratives are sacred or meant to be told only by specific community members. It just means teachers must be mindful of cultural protocols and seek guidance from Indigenous elders or knowledge keepers in order to respectively integrate storytelling into their lessons. Also, there may be a lack of access to appropriate resources within your school, such as Indigenous authored books or guest speakers, which can make it difficult to provide students with meaningful and accurate representations of Indigenous perspectives. Another potential challenge could be addressing misconceptions or stereotypes that students might have about Indigenous cultures, which would require us as educators to approach discussions with sensitivity and commitment to fostering cultural understanding for our students. But despite these challenges, I believe with proper research, collaboration, and openness to learning, that us as teachers can successfully incorporate Indigenous storytelling in a way that is respectful and educational for all the students within our classroom. So, to end this off, I just wanted to quickly touch on why all this information actually matters for us as future educators. And I've come to the conclusion that understanding and incorporating Indigenous storytelling is really important for future educators because it really helps to create a more inclusive and culturally responsive classroom. I also think by integrating Indigenous perspectives into language learning, us as teachers are able to help students develop a deeper appreciation for diverse ways of knowing and communicating. And this approach also aligns well with the curriculum expectations that emphasize Indigenous knowledge, ensuring that students engage with authentic stories and reflect the histories, values, and traditions of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. Also, as futures educators, we play a crucial role in breaking down stereotypes and promoting reconciliation by creating learning spaces that honor Indigenous voices. So, I would think by embracing storytelling as a teaching tool, we as educators can help build meaningful connections between students and Indigenous cultures, ensuring that these traditions continue to be valued and respected in education. Well, thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed my webinar and were able to get some good knowledge on Indigenous storytelling. If you're looking to do any research on it and you want to explore some of the references I use, they're all listed on this page here. And yeah, thank you so much for listening.